Number 6, Tennessee. 7-point favorite on the road. Number 15, Oklahoma. SEC debut for Oklahoma. The over-under I have for this one is 6.5 Toby Keith references. I think I'm about to have more on this segment. I think I am. Josh Heupel, Oklahoma reunion. Deserves a new name. A more all-encompassing name, dare I say. This is the Toby Keith Bowl. This is it.
Okay.
To honor the late Toby Keith, who unfortunately is no longer with us, I need to probably explain why we have very often said this is a Toby Keith game for someone. For those who maybe don't listen very regularly, maybe you just listen to game previews or something like that, or you haven't heard an explanation of why we call something a Toby Keith game. It's a how do you like me now win, usually referring to a head coach getting that win. I guess it can also pertain to quarterbacks or something like that. So this game is just the perfect culmination of that in a variety of ways. For Josh Heupel, even as the touchdown favorite, obviously, which, as Dusty Dvorak pointed out with my guys in the next round, OU is his biggest home underdog. Let me see if I can say that correctly. Biggest home underdog that OU has been since 1998, pre-Bob Stoops era. That's wild to me. Absolutely wild. For Heupel, very well documented what this game represents. Heisman runner-up, led OU to a national title 2000, spent nearly a decade there as an assistant, and then when OU was the preseason number 4 team in the country, and then they only win 8 games, Heupel took the blame as the OC when they got whacked 40-6 by Clemson at the end of the 2014 season. You get it. Lincoln Riley, of course, then steps in and becomes what he becomes. Heupel then essentially has to rebuild his career and has to go to Utah State and kind of climb his way back up the ladder. Not quite as drastic as Lane Kiffin getting left on the tarmac, but you kind of get the process of what it takes to be able to do these things sometimes. That's the long and short of it. Are there hard feelings between Josh Heupel and Oklahoma? Depends on who you ask. We talked to Trey Wallace about that. We talked to Chris Plank about that. Those are, in my opinion, people who are very, very well informed, different ends of this spectrum with Tennessee and Oklahoma. But if you ask Heupel about it, he kind of has been a little bit more playful about this subject, and he brushes it off. He said repeatedly that if he didn't go through what he went through at Oklahoma by rising and getting fired there, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing now, which is leading a premier program that looks capable of, maybe not just competing for a playoff spot, but potentially competing for a national championship.
I mean, this is an all-time. I mean, this might be even specific to Heupel, but both of these guys, this might be the all-time "How do you like me now" game. I love that. I love that call out. Did you see the quote that Venables had about Heupel and Achilles Smith?
I did not see that. No.
Man.
Was it the in the Chris Lowe story?
It was like he got asked it like yesterday. Okay. Like I saw it as a press conference thing, but it was okay. Either this is a good-natured, like one of the sweetest, most like candid stories I've ever seen, or it's a little bit of intentional kind of like downplaying Heupel. But he tells this story about how, they come in from Kansas State, talking about Venables, and it's crazy looking at these guys' ages. There's only, we'll do math, 7 years of difference between them. So I mean, Venables would have been very young.
Venables was the DC when Heupel was the quarterback there. So yeah, I mean, like a young DC.
Yeah. So we're talking about guys that are both young, both in their 20s, right? And they said they were scouting quarterbacks, Mike Leach and Brent Venables, and they brought in Venables wanted to bring in Achilles Smith, who was coming out of JUCO at the time. And he said, Mike Leach, they come out and they have Heupel throw in. He said, he's a pasty guy. Kind of said he didn't really look great. So he looked a little doughy, a little pale. He said it's the winter, the wind's blowing. And he's like, this guy ain't it. I mean, this guy's not going to get it done. I want to go get Achilles Smith. And he said, Leach looked at him and said, that's our guy. And basically, and then Venables comes back around and says, well, he proved me wrong a little bit. And it was kind of, like I said, like negative, like negating of being like, because he's talking about Achilles Smith, talking about, this guy's, got the pro style. He's ripping the ball around the yard. And they canceled the visit that Achilles Smith was going to have because Leach liked Heupel so much. And so, yeah, it's crazy when you get guys that are kind of, it's so rare that we get to see a guy who was a player and a guy that was a coach, and their ages are this similar. I mean, to your point, Oklahoma, I guess, finds coaches really young because we've seen this kind of over and over again with them. But these are two guys that are just so different, offensive, defensive coated guys. Right, Venables is the dry fit guy. He's kind of more like he's super. He's swole. He's a defensive hard nose. Like I could see him doing an Oklahoma drill at Oklahoma. And then Heupel is a guy who's kind of unassuming. He's always going to kind of and he's very he's just a very humble, very chill guy. And so watching these two guys, I mean, this is like soap opera stuff, man.
It really is. And that's just another element of why, like, this is the How Do You Like Me Now game. I mean, Venables himself saying, yeah, I don't really know if I want that Heupel guy. I'd rather go with Akili Smith. I mean, coming over from Snow College, as Josh Heupel did back in the day. I mean, yeah, it's crazy to think about his path and to think about now being in this position where you have a chance to go back to your alma mater, the place that fired you, and have a chance to have this moment on this national stage. It is so rare. It is so unique and so fittingly college football that we're getting this. I'd like to think that when Heupel got the Tennessee job, maybe some Oklahoma fans laughed for the simple reason that, look, I like to make these things up in my head. Maybe Oklahoma fans are like, yeah, you know what? Like, he's never really going to figure it out, which would perfectly set up Heupel to maybe take some screenshots of those messages. And he's like, when I took off to Tennessee, I heard that you made fun of me. Never imagined I'd make it this far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just sitting right there.
Dude, yeah, I mean, it's perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think like now I'm on my way. It's like I'm in Tennessee. I have my own program, I mean, their offense, it's
that day. Will, there's more.
Oh.
Toby Keith might have looked into a crystal ball and secretly written this song for Josh Heupel and then was like, yeah, we'll make it about this guy who can't get this valedictorian in high school. That's a little bit more relatable, instead of me as a diehard Oklahoma fan writing this to the guy who is currently the quarterback at Oklahoma. Because remember when this song came out, fall of 99, Heupel's first year at OU.
No way.
In 2000, when Heupel was a Heisman runner-up, How Do You Like Me Now hit the top of the country charts. It was a crossover hit as well. I hope that when Heupel went to New York for the Heisman ceremony, he just played that song on repeat and he thought about the Weber State coaches who had him buried on the depth chart. And he's like thinking about his path. Or maybe Heupel played that on his way back from the national championship after he faced off with the guy who won the Heisman, Chris Winkie, and beat him in a national championship. By the way, who sang the national anthem at the Orange Bowl, the national championship that year that Heupel won it? Toby freaking Keith, Will.
No way. This is crazy.
This is the Toby Keith Bowl in every way. And not even just for Heupel. That's kind of the crazy thing. Think about this, what this means for Oklahoma. I mean, if we just had the Oklahoma side of this is what we would be talking about. Remove all the Heupel stuff. Oklahoma playing in the SEC for 3 years. OU has had to answer the question about whether or not it's SEC ready. Okay. And we've talked about it on this show for a long time and have gone through different iterations of it because they've been a lot of different things over the course of the last 3 years. And how fitting that this is their first SEC game. It's against a Tennessee team that, gosh, I was thinking about this, and our guy Cole Kubelik would probably be a better person to answer this question. But is there anybody in the country that's playing better in the trenches than Tennessee right now? Offensive and defensive line, like, they are getting after teams and they are dominating in that way. And it's going to be a game in which we get such a good answer to that question for Oklahoma of how they're going to stack up in that way. Obviously, you're going to have so much attention on this game. College Game Day coming to Norman with fans for the first time since 2012. They hosted Game Day in 2020, but obviously without fans. If OU wins this game against Tennessee, buddy, they had better be blasting some How Do You Like Me Now in that post-game locker room. Blasting it. Tennessee better have that queued up with the social team. Will, you always talk about the social posts that you want to see that that don't see the light of day if a team loses or something like that. This better be in the drafts, ready to go for either team. So can Oklahoma win the Toby Keith Bowl? Who, look, as my guy Chris Plank said on this show, he told us in the offseason, he had never seen a person happier than Toby Keith after Oklahoma beat Bama in the Sugar Bowl 2013. You know what? I just can't help but think that, like all of us who are going to be glued into this game, Toby Keith, who's usually on the sideline for every Oklahoma game, he will be watching this maybe from the pearly gates, hopefully from the pearly gates. Toby Keith's watching that, sitting there with his red Solo cup. He's like, come on, Sooners. Come on. Just give me my moment. I think OU plays out of its skull to start this one. Like, plays like a team possessed. moves on from the Houston start, moves on from the Tulane lull that happened kind of in the second half of that one. Nick Anderson's back. Jackson Arnold outplays Nico in the first half. Everybody's like, dang, I guess we were sleeping on Oklahoma a little bit. Josh Heupel somehow doesn't have an opening script touchdown for a game plan that he's probably been thinking about for 10 years. Everyone in Norman's rocking. But the poise of Nico Iamaleava and the depth of that Tennessee defensive line takes over. Nico does something that he hasn't had to do in his career to this point. Not just play on the road, but rally. This game is your last chance. If I'm speaking to someone that's like, you know what, Tennessee quarterback, where have we seen this before? This is your last chance to get on board. If you're not all the way in with Nico, the train's leaving the station. And I'm not saying he plays perfect football in this one. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case because I just told you, I think Jackson Arnold's going to outplay him in the first half. I think this OU defense confuses him at times. Maybe a Billy Bowman pick in there. I could definitely see that happening. But a fourth quarter comeback that'll live in Tennessee lore, that's what's going to play out. I think Oklahoma covers, but can't quite put Tennessee away. That defensive line shuts down the Oklahoma running game late. I think Tennessee wins this one 28-24 in a game that absolutely lives up to the hype.
So I see what you did there. So yeah, I think this is why we love sports, right? This is it. You can't write this, all the little intricacies of, one leaving, one going, whatever. And to me, man, I'm just going to be honest. Maybe this is my bold prediction for the season. I think Tennessee beats the snot out of them. I think they put their foot on their throat. I think Josh Heupel has a lot to prove to this fan base and this team. And I think, it shows that, we've passed the threshold of, I think, where Josh Heupel would go to Oklahoma, where he would leave Tennessee. I think it shows that he is on his own, right? That he's doing this stuff. And when you think about the trajectory of these two guys, Josh Heupel took over certainly a worse situation in my mind, right?
No doubt whatsoever. Yeah. Like we could talk about the 30-day window and all that stuff, but like Tennessee post Pruitt, what Heupel did year one was so unbelievably impressive with that roster, with how much turnover they had. I was impressed with a 7-win season. And it's not to say that Oklahoma didn't have its fair share of transfers and stuff like that. Obviously they lost Caleb Williams for crying out loud, but still, I would 100% say that it was a worse situation that Josh Heupel inherited.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you talk to Oklahoma fans and they'll tell you, oh my gosh, you just don't understand how bad Lincoln Riley was. And as we've discussed, that's your best coach by win percentage, not championships, obviously, but win percentage. This is a team that was winning lots of games.
They would disagree. They would disagree with you on that one.
But I'm just saying, like, it's not, this guy left. It wasn't like, okay, let's just put two realities on the board. One team was so sorry they framed their own coach for paying players with McDonald's bags. Or you want to talk about poverty? That's poverty. Yeah. Painting the Rock, getting Giotto out of town, having a coup. That's a problem, okay? It's not we have one head coach for 20 years, we have his heir apparent waiting in the wings, and then he gets a little tired and he leaves. That's not real struggle. Tennessee has been struggling for this, my whole life.
You put it like that, yeah.
Since the SEC championship game against LSU when I was a wee lad, or I guess that was 07, maybe I wasn't a wee lad, but it feels like it in football terms, right? Feels like, that was the last time Tennessee was really contending, right? You had that little blip on the radar, in 22, but I will say, Josh Heupel immediately beat the timetable in a way that I would argue Venables hasn't. I think that Venables came in with higher expectations and has underperformed them. And Heupel came in from UCF, into this disaster. And I was saying, I don't know if his offense is going to work at the SEC. And I was wrong. It's working. It's the number one offense in America. I don't know if, I guess you could talk about Texas, Michigan, but I think Michigan just stinks. That NC State win might be the biggest win that we've seen this year.
For
Tennessee.
The biggest win of any team in college football?
Yeah.
I would disagree. I would definitely put what Texas did at Michigan ahead of them, even if Michigan ends up being an 8-4 team. Because what if NC State ends? NC State's a 3-touchdown underdog at Clemson this weekend, right?
I'm with you, but think about it. Bringing in Grayson McCall. These are two programs that were really
hurt. Yeah,
right. That's the thing. Grayson McCall gets hurt and it looks worse over time. But I just think Michigan's not that good. I watched the whole Michigan game. Opening the season, they just look lost. I just don't think Michigan's any kind of a good team. And plenty of people have marched into that big house and beaten them. You know what I'm saying? NC State is say what you will. They have had strong defenses. They've had good quarterbacks. They had a good quarterback in that game, and they got embarrassed. And Like, that was more shocking of a result to me. What do you like that?
So how about this then? The winner of this game gets to have the best win of the season.
Yeah. And I mean, but we'll see how Oklahoma does this year. But I think this is going to be Tennessee's coming out party. I really do. I think that, when you look at what these teams had to fix, right? With Tennessee, it was very clearly building a defense and building an offensive line that could keep up with Heupel's pace. Okay. And honestly, even in years 1 and 2, it looked like they were doing that. I mean, they had some very key transfers. They had to rebuild, the line with Mays, and that stuff takes years, as we see. But now they have a team built in Josh Heupel's perfect image. They have a mobile quarterback. They are one of the best line teams, like you said. And how shocking is that this team that was known like the Mike D'Antoni 7-second Suns is out here mauling guys?
Think about that, about all of these elements that Tennessee has working in its favor. And instead of the potential upside of just talking about a quarterback that Josh Heupel has groomed and some receivers that look really fun and a ground game that's rock solid, in terms of upside and vision of what some were saying, us included, of what the Tennessee could become, this is potentially an apex season for Tennessee. And it's the type of thing that you sell when you're in those interview rooms and you're trying to say, this is why I deserve this position. Tennessee is further along, obviously, than where Oklahoma is. And I'll push back a little bit on the notion that Venables hasn't necessarily lived up to expectations. They gave him an extension for a reason. It's because of the recruiting as well. And that's a part of it. We talked about
this
how they
built the worst Oklahoma football has been that I remember.
Correct. I think it's different when you're talking about like the year one stuff versus like what they were last year as a 10-win team. Where were their weaknesses? They still ended up beating Texas that year, which is obviously really important. Beating Texas and having a 10-win season, a little bit different. Some would argue 2014, the year that Heupel ends up getting the boot, that might have been a little bit more of a lull. But anyway, we could debate that at a different time. But like if you're at that place, you're at that apex, right? That Tennessee feels like it's at that. A lot of us feel like it's at. These are the games you win.
Yep.
These are the games. These are the hostile atmospheres you go into and you silence. And Tennessee in 22, LSU at noon or at 11 o'clock did that in that instance. But that was the kind of the question and kind of the lingering bad taste is like those hostile atmospheres of Georgia and South Carolina that they went into, they kind of got swallowed whole by. And can you show that? Because this Oklahoma atmosphere, I'm telling you what, it's going to be reminiscent of that Georgia atmosphere, reminiscent of, that South Carolina atmosphere. Once it got going, it was rocking, absolutely rocking. So I'm fascinated to see the way that Heupel handles this. And I cannot wait for this game. This is the game I'm most excited for of any that have happened so far this season. Cannot wait.
Yes, and I mean that's the thing, right? Because you could kind of see both sides there, right? Going into Tiger Stadium and smacking an LSU team that ended up, winning the West, right? A good LSU team, like that and Alabama were kind of the two biggest Tennessee wins that I can remember. I know I'm kind of talking off the cuff here, but when you talk about, how that win aged very well, right? Outside of
Jaden got better too, which helped age that win, and that game was the infamous like. It's one-on-one coverage. You have to take a chance that Brian Kelly had with him.
Boy,
he
did he.
Did.
Yeah. But yeah, he got to your point. That was probably a game that turned him around where he's like, I actually do trust Mike Neighbors. But anyway, so point being, like, I look at, like I said, what Oklahoma had to get, what Tennessee had to get better at, its trenches, its defense, which is a big ask when you're coming in from a Pruitt team. And for Oklahoma, it's the offense, right? And I mean, outside of a, Herculean Dylan Gabriel performance, which you just mentioned last year, and I think that was a good offensive team. I'm not taking anything away from it, but Dylan Gabriel really just kind of went Super Saiyan, right? Like we've seen that stuff happen. They haven't consistently, I think, found their offensive identity. I've actually watched a pretty good amount of Oklahoma this year, and I just feel like they're fighting for their lives in ways that they really shouldn't be. And if you're it's like, I hate to talk about LSU again, but it's like I have a good friend who's an Oklahoma fan. We always joke about LSU is now Oklahoma and Oklahoma is now LSU, where it's like you guys have a good defense. Somehow you're winning these games 20-17 off of these weird miscues because you can't snap the ball. Meanwhile, there's a high flying offense on the other side. So I think the thing that's so crazy about this is that defensively, you would talk about Venables being this great mind, getting the transfers and always trusting Venables on the defensive side. That's a close call with them in Tennessee now. Tennessee is right there, not a little bit better, but offensively, it's night and day. And I think that, you can look at the Georgia game for sure and say Tennessee goes on the road and gets silenced. But when you really look at how that roster is constructed, it was, 5-6 stars and a bunch of duct tape behind them. And, we've kind of evolved from the Heupel scores 21 points in his first 15 plays that are on the script that we just joke about, and then he's just holding on for the rest of the game. I think he's almost gotten worse at the scripted plays and better at everything else. And so, yeah, I think that now that he has a quarterback who can make things happen with his legs, which we've seen how big of a deal that is in modern college football, right? I mean, it's so crazy to see where this team has gone. So, yeah, I think that, and we'll know, I think we'll know pretty soon. If it's a Josh Heupel Turtle game, I think we've seen the Josh Heupel Turtle games. The problem with that offense is if it doesn't work, it gets bad fast.
3 outs, defense is fast. Yep.
Yeah, and if it's to your point, if this is a comeback, that's worse to me almost than like a beatdown, because if you get Heupel to where he's turtling and you're up and you're smacking them and they can't stay on the field, and then suddenly they're like, Emil Alva's like, I got this. That's where you need to really be scared about Tennessee, because that's what they couldn't do last year. That's what they couldn't do in 2022, because they didn't have the chemistry, they didn't have the depth. If they come back against this Oklahoma team, it's a team that could be talking national championship a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Very, very well could be that discussion on Saturday night. But easily the game of the week in the SEC, and for my money, the game of the week in college football.